WWE wrestlers come from all over the world, but a lot come from the United States. So many, in fact, that every state in the country has at least one, if not multiple wrestlers that hail from it. Before we get into the rankings, to determine which state a wrestler belongs to, we are going with the state they were born in. This will make for some interesting choices, so let's begin with Number 1, Alabama, Sherry Martel. While Sensational Sherry was best known as a manager, she did have a pretty decorated in-ring career. She was a WWE Women's Champion and held the belt for over 400 days after taking the gold from the Fabulous Moolah in 1987. During that time, she also played the role of Peggy Sue, the girlfriend of the Honky Tonk Man. After her run with the belt ended, Sherry moved into a full-time manager role, most notably by the side of Randy Savage after Savage ended his relationship with Miss Elizabeth. Together, they feuded with Hulk Hogan in the year's biggest storyline. Later on, Martel also had a memorable match at WrestleMania 6 when she teamed with Savage in a losing battle against Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire. Martel then helped out the Next Generation by managing Shawn Michaels during his singles run before later turning on him to help out Marty Jannetty. To date, Sherry is one of the most beloved managers in WWE history and can also hold the title of Alabama's best WWE wrestler. Number 2, Alaska, Dion Russman. Hailing from Wasilla, WWE's greatest wrestler from Alaska is Dion Russman. Does that name not ring a bell? Well, that's because he only wrestled one match in WWE. It was on the December 23rd, 2019 episode of Raw, where Russman learned the hard way not to knock on Aleister Black's door. Unfortunately, the wrestler from the Last Frontier didn't get in a single offensive move and was pinned in 38 seconds. Considering Russman is only a few years into his wrestling career, it's understandable. Since then, Dion Russman has made a few appearances in AEW, and there's still time for him to show back up in WWE and make his home state proud. Number 3, Arizona, Shawn Michaels. The Grand Canyon State isn't a massive place in terms of population, but it is home to 3 of the most iconic wrestlers to ever compete in a WWE ring. First, there's Billy Graham, who inspired Hulk Hogan and countless other wrestlers over the years. Then, there's the Ultimate Warrior, who is one of the biggest wrestling stars in the late 80s and early 90s. While both men are legends, no one from the Grand Canyon State has contributed more to WWE than the showstopper, Shawn Michaels. For many, HBK is the greatest in-ring performer to ever wrestle in WWE, producing more classic matches than perhaps anyone else in the company's history. Throw in 4 world title runs, forming the iconic D-Generation X with Triple H, competing in multiple WrestleMania main events, and his current work coaching the Next Generation NXT, and it's hard to argue that Michaels doesn't deserve sweet chin music to anyone challenging him as the greatest WWE wrestler from Arizona. Number 4, Arkansas, Sid Vicious. 2-time WWE champion and WrestleMania 8 and 13 main eventer Sid Vicious can trace his path of destruction directly to Arkansas. Despite only being in WWE for a few years total, Sid left his mark on the company with major rivalries against Hulk Hogan during his first run and later Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker when he returned. It's not hard to see why Sid got such a big push. He has the size and distinct look that WWE goes crazy for, and while he wasn't so great in the ring, he had a menacing aura about him that few other wrestlers have possessed. In 2012, fans were shocked when Sid's familiar music played for One Last Night in WWE. Vicious returned to demolish Heath Slater as the company built towards the 1000th episode of Raw, adding another memorable moment to the career of the Wonder State's most psychotic and greatest WWE wrestler. Number 5, California, The Rock. The most populated state in the country has produced a lot of phenomenal wrestlers, such as the Usos, Rey Mysterio, Sasha Banks, and many more. While they are all great in their own right, the best wrestler to come out of the Golden State is easily The Rock. In his youth, the Great One spent time in New Zealand, Hawaii, North Carolina, Connecticut, and Tennessee, but he was born in the city of Hayward, California. Debuting in WWE in late 1996, it wasn't long before The Rock became one of the most popular wrestlers in the company, winning world championships and main eventing multiple WrestleManias. His battles against Steve Austin are legendary, and among the highlights of the Attitude Era. And on the mic, there was no one who could rival The Rock's quick wit, clever insults, and endless catchphrases. Rock was so good at talking and so charismatic on camera that it wasn't long before Hollywood called and took him away from the squared circle for years. He finally returned in 2011, leading to him becoming WWE Champion again and facing John Cena in back-to-back WrestleMania main events. Even if The Rock never wrestles another match, it would be hard to imagine anyone from California eclipsing him in pure talent and star power. Number 6, Colorado, Dr. Death. When it comes to the continental state, it's a bit difficult to pick out who is the best WWE wrestler. You could go with Too Cold Scorpio, but he spent most of his time in the company as a lower level wrestler. Many would pick Vader, but he was actually born in California. Same thing with Bobby Lashley, who was born in Kansas. This leaves Dr. Death Steve Williams as the top pick for Colorado. While Williams is a legend in the wrestling business, his most prominent work was in Japan and WCW. His WWE run was more of a case of what could have been, with reported major plans for him to feud with Steve Austin. However, a string of injuries and a devastating loss in the Brawl for All tournament sidelined those plans. Williams then briefly appeared alongside a heel Jim Ross later in his run, but that angle never went anywhere. In the end, his time in WWE was nowhere as big as it could have been, leaving Dr. Death running the company as a giant what if. Number 7, Connecticut, Just Incredible. He's not just the coolest, but Just Incredible is also the best WWE wrestler from Connecticut. While most of Incredible's success as a wrestler happened in ECW, he did spend a few years of his lengthy career in WWE. After initially debuting as an enhancement talent, Incredible was signed to a full-time deal and given the gimmick of Aldo Montoya, the Portuguese Man of War. As a young wrestler, it seemed like a good gig, but the gimmick ended up being more silly than anything, and it didn't see him take part in many meaningful feuds or storylines. He then went to ECW as part of a talent exchange, became a more serious star, and eventually became their heavyweight champion. After the ECW run ended, Credible returned to WWE to team with X-Pac and Albert in the X Factor, and later became a member of the Alliance. Credible was released in 2003, but returned for one more brief run in the revived ECW in 2006, and was CM Punk's debut opponent before being released once again. Still, his work in the company makes him the greatest wrestler from Connecticut to date. Number 8, Delaware, Bulldog Brower. For Delaware, it's a little tricky to pick the greatest WWE wrestler. The Briscoe brothers would have easily taken this award, but they only wrestled a single non-televised match in the company. Simon Diamond is also from the First State, but his success was largely from his days in ECW and TNA, with only a few squash matches to his WWE resume. This means the winner for the most impactful wrestler from Delaware is Bulldog Brewer. Now, Brewer may not be a household name, but he did compete in WWE from 1979 to 1982. Along the way, he was managed by Hall of Famer Captain Lou Albano and competed for the tag titles on multiple occasions. He also battled Pedro Morales for the Intercontinental title. Brewer never held gold in the company and passed away in 1987, but he still remains the greatest wrestler from Delaware that WWE has seen yet. Number 9, Florida, Roman Reigns. Being another heavily populated state, Florida has a large roster of great wrestlers like MVP, Bray Wyatt, Big E, and more. However, like his cousin, we have to go with the tribal chief, Roman Reigns. Debuting on the main roster in 2012 as part of the Shield, Roman was still destined to be the top guy from the start. Even as fans often rejected him, he was still the clear successor to John Cena. A long-awaited heel turn did wonders for Roman, and his growing confidence and underrated in-ring ability have solidified him as one of the best performers of his generation. Over the past few years, no one can touch his star presence. At the age of 37, Roman already has 6 WrestleMania main events under his belt, with only Hulk Hogan and Triple H appearing in more. He's also held the Universal title longer than anyone. At this point, it's a sure thing Roman will make it to the WWE Hall of Fame, and even on a reduced schedule these days, he'll likely be the face of the company for years to come. Number 10, Georgia, Hulk Hogan. While most of his life was spent living in Florida, Hulk Hogan is actually from Augusta, Georgia, which means he easily walks away with the best wrestler from the state. For starters, Hogan might be the most well-known wrestler in WWE history. He was the face of the company throughout most of the 80s and into the 90s, as Hulkamania was running wild and taking the wrestling business to unprecedented heights. In fact, it's hard to imagine WWE would be as big or as popular as it is without having Hogan on its roster in the mid-80s. Years later, after leaving WWE for WCW, the Hulkster returned in 2002 along with the NWO. He ended his WWE career there by donning the red and yellow one last time and capturing the WWE title. As has often been stated, Hulk Hogan is the Babe Ruth of WWE, and for merchandise sales, TV ratings, and overall impact on the company, Hogan is basically in a league of his own. Number 11, Hawaii, Don Muraco. The last state to join the country is home to 2-time Intercontinental Champion and the first ever King of the Ring winner, Don "The Rock" Muraco. The Hawaiian wrestler was brought into WWE in 1981 and managed by the Grand Wizard. During this time, Muraco battled Bob Backlund for the WWE Championship, although he never won the title. Perhaps Don's most iconic moment during his run was getting squashed by Jimmy Snuka inside of a steel cage in 1983. Later, Muraco received another big push, battling Hulk Hogan for the world title. but much like his battles against Backlund, he didn't capture the gold. Morocco then moved into the tag team division and eventually took on more of a comedic role after being managed by Mr. Fuji and taking part in skits like Fuji Vice. While he was let go from the company in 1988, his work inside and outside of the ring landed the Hawaiian wrestler in the company's Hall of Fame in 2004. Number 12, Idaho, Tori Wilson. In pop culture, Idaho is often overlooked, with most people knowing it as the Potato State. However, Idaho is home to WWE Hall of Famer Tori Wilson. Born in the capital of Boise, Tori got into the wrestling business in an interesting way. While attending a WCW show with her boyfriend, she got the opportunity to walk out with Scott Steiner to the ring. From there, she became a regular character during WCW's final years, and then had her contract picked up by WWE. Once she debuted, Tori succeeded more than most probably would have predicted, as she was involved in memorable angles with Tajiri, Dawn Marie, and competed in multiple WrestleMania matches. While Tori never won a title in WWE, she spent 7 years in the company, which was much longer than many of her contemporaries. Since then, she's shown up in a handful of matches and entered the company's Hall of Fame in 2019, making the state of Idaho quite proud. Number 13, Illinois, CM Punk. Few wrestlers are associated with their home city as CM Punk is. He's a proud Chicagoan whose ring gear often displayed the city's flag. Debuting on WWE TV in 2006, Punk carved out one of the most influential careers of any wrestler from his generation. It took a few years for the company to get behind him fully, but when they let him go off and deliver the pipe bomb promo, they created lightning in a bottle. After that one segment, Punk instantly became the hottest wrestler in the country. He was the antithesis of John Cena and was known as the voice of the voiceless by speaking to fans who had grown disillusioned by the product. By the end of his WWE career, Punk enjoyed 6 world title runs, including an incredible 434-day title reign with the WWE Championship. On the mic, few were his equals, and he was in some of the most memorable feuds the company had seen in years. While Punk famously left the company in 2014 after years of frustration, few wrestlers have had as much of an impact on WWE than he did during his 8-year run. Number 14, Indiana, Mick Foley. While Mrs. Foley's baby boy is most well known for being a New Yorker, he was actually born in Bloomington, Indiana in 1965. Foley's pre-WWE career is legendary. He wrestled in some of the most hardcore matches around the world, lost part of his ear, and cut spellbinding promos in ECW, but Foley's stature was taken to a new level when he debuted in WWE as Mankind in 1996. From the start, Foley got over as a deranged opponent for The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, and Steve Austin, often taking daredevil bumps that thrilled the crowds. While his WWE career wasn't as long as others, Foley's few years in WWE as a full-time wrestler remained loved by fans. Even after retirement, he was instrumental in helping take a young Randy Orton to the next level. From the Rock and Sock connection to the 3 faces of Foley to finally winning the world title, Mick was a key part of WWE's most popular era and received a well-earned introduction into the company's Hall of Fame in 2013. Number 15, Iowa, Seth Rollins. Even with a population of just over 3 million, Iowa is home to one of the biggest stars in WWE over the past decade. Seth frickin' Rollins was born in the city of Davenport, but grew up in the much smaller town of Buffalo. After a successful run in NXT in 2012, Rollins jumped to the main roster alongside Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns. The trio formed the Shield, and the group was immediately thrust into major storylines and often delivered the best matches on the show. After the group broke up at the hands of the Architect, Rollins' singles career has proven to be just as successful. He's widely viewed as one of the most talented in-ring wrestlers on the roster, and has successfully reinvented his character multiple times. To date, he's the only wrestler to have held the WWE, Universal, and NXT titles. Considering Rollins still has years left in the business, it's hard to imagine any up-and-coming wrestler from the Hawkeye State overtaking him as Iowa's greatest performer. Number 16, Kansas, Bobby Lashley. As I mentioned, the Almighty was born in the Sunflower State. Lashley grew up in a military family and was born in Junction City, Kansas. In 2005, he joined WWE, and it was clear that they had big things in mind for the young wrestler. Just over a year into his run, Lashley moved to ECW and captured the brand's world title at December to Dismember. Lashley was then placed into the biggest match of his career, while representing Donald Trump against Vince McMahon's pick, Umaga, in a hair versus hair match at WrestleMania remaining at 23. Despite all the success, Lashley left the company not long after and didn't return until 2018. He largely picked up right where he left off, this time with better in-ring skills and more confidence on the mic, leading to him capturing the WWE title twice. You can only imagine how much success he would have had he stayed in the company the entire time, but still, the Kansas-born almighty Bobby Lashley has carved out an impressive career. Number 17, Kentucky, Hillbilly Jim. As this wrestler's theme song said, don't go messing with a country boy, and you definitely wouldn't want to with the 6'7" Kentucky native, Hillbilly Jim. In 1985, Jim debuted in WWE and turned down Roddy Piper's offer to train him, and instead chose Hulk Hogan. From there, he became a fan favorite as he teamed with other storyline family members, including Uncle Elmer, Cousin Luke, and Cousin Junior. While the group was largely a comedy act, Jim did have a few high-profile matches by teaming with Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. After Jim's first run ended, he returned years later to manage his cousins, the Godwins, until they turned heel. While Hillbilly Jim never did capture WWE gold, he did manage to earn a Hall of Fame induction in 2018. Not bad for a country boy from Kentucky. Number 18, Louisiana, Ernie Ladd. You'd have to go back to the 1970s to catch Louisiana's greatest WWE wrestler in his prime, but there's no doubt that the big cat Ernie Ladd was one of the biggest stars of his era. After an injury brought his football career to an end, Ladd took up wrestling and had his first WWE match in 1968, where he was managed by someone we mentioned before, the Grand Wizard. Before long, the 6'9" athlete was feuding with some of the biggest names like Gorilla Monsoon, Bob Backlund, Andre the Giant, and Bruno Sammartino. Ladd ended up leaving WWE in 1980 without ever winning a world title, but he was a top draw for the company. The big cat possessed a larger-than-life personality and was so beloved by WWE that he and the Grand Wizard were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 1995. Number 19, Maine, Scotty 2 Hotty. Maine's best wrestler is simply too cool. While most fans remember Scotty 2 Hotty from his run in the Attitude Era, his start in WWE went way back before that. Perhaps a bit too much. I say that because Scotty, who debuted as Scott Taylor, wrestled his first WWE match in 1991 when he was a junior in high school. After graduation, he continued working as an enhancement talent until he signed a contract in 1997. Not long into his run, he joined forces with Brian Christopher to form the tag team Too Much. The duo took on a more over-the-top hip-hop gimmick and were soon renamed Too Cool, but their gimmick was so ridiculous that the fans couldn't help but love it. With their post-match dance routine and absurd in-ring antics, they became one of the most entertaining acts in WWE. The addition of Rikishi just took things to a new level. Scotty 2 Hotty ended up holding the tag team titles 2 times during his run before being let go from the company in 2007. But with all his accomplishments and the memories he's given fans, the Master of the Worm has earned his place on this list. Number 20, Maryland, Scott Hall. The bad guy, Scott Hall, spent most of his childhood traveling from one home to the next with his military father, but he was born in the state of Maryland. After a lackluster WCW run, Hall arrived in the WWE in 1993, debuting as Razor Ramon, a character molded after Tony Montana from Scarface. McMahon instantly fell in love with the gimmick, which meant Hall was destined for great things right out of the gate. It wasn't just a great character either, as Hall could deliver in the ring. He competed in classic ladder matches against Shawn Michaels and captured the Intercontinental title on 4 occasions. He was widely seen as one of the most charismatic wrestlers on the roster, and his cool factor inspired the following generation of wrestlers. After becoming an even bigger name in WCW, Hall returned to WWE in 2002 with a brief run as a member of the New World Order. For all his contributions to the business, he was later honored with not 1, but 2 WWE Hall of Fame inductions. For all his success and influence, the bad guy adds another recognition to his resume as the Free State's greatest wrestler. Number 21, Massachusetts, John Cena. Don't let the Doctor of Thugonomics gimmick fool you. John Cena was born in the not-so-dangerous city of West Newbury, Massachusetts. Debuting in WWE in 2002 to deliver some ruthless aggression to Kurt Angle, Cena was a hot prospect for the company. For over the next decade, Cena was the guy. He currently has 16 world championships, a record he shares with Ric Flair, and it's not hard to imagine he'll someday capture a 17th title. Simply, there's no one who's been in bigger WWE matches over the past 20 years than Cena. And much like The Rock before him, Hollywood came calling, making him a crossover star who has starred in a series of blockbuster films. Love him or hate him, John Cena is one of the biggest and most hardworking stars in WWE history, and the greatest wrestler yet from Massachusetts. Number 22, Michigan, Kevin Nash. You can call him Oz, Vinny Vegas, Big Daddy Cool, Big Sexy, Diesel, or just Kevin Nash, but you also have to call him the best WWE wrestler from Michigan. While WCW didn't see a lot in Nash, WWE featured him in a prominent role as soon as he debuted, aligning himself with Shawn Michaels. The two were a popular pairing, and Nash became an even bigger star when they broke up. As Diesel, he won the WWE title from Bob Backlund within seconds. Nash then became the face of the company and held the gold for an impressive 358 days. After the title run ended, he infamously left WWE along with Scott Hall after the curtain call incident. He then returned in 2002 for a run with the NWO and later a brief feud with his real-life friend Triple H in 2011. In addition to his world title run, throw in his Intercontinental title run, 2 tag title runs, and 2 WWE Hall of Fame inductions, and Nash takes his place as one of the most influential wrestlers of his era and the best WWE wrestler from the Great Lakes state. Number 23, Minnesota, Bob Backlund. Despite not being one of the most populated states in the Union, Minnesota is home to a surprisingly large number of famous WWE wrestlers. Jesse Ventura, X-Pac, Rick Rude, Molly Holly, and Mr. Perfect, among others, were all born in the land of 10,000 lakes. But to go with the greatest WWE wrestler, you have to choose Bob Backlund, who was born in Princeton, Minnesota, a town of under 5,000 people. While Backlund may not be as celebrated as Bruno Sammartino or Hulk Hogan, he held the WWE title for over 2,000 days, which, to put in context, is about 900 days longer than every John Cena title reign put together. Unfortunately for Backlund, he left WWE right before their national expansion, so he never quite became a household name. After his big run, he did return to the company sporadically throughout the years, most memorably defeating Bret Hart to earn a brief world title reign and later managing Darren Young in 2016. Backlund is known to be a bit eccentric, but his place in WWE history and as Minnesota's greatest wrestler is undeniable. Number 24, Mississippi, Kamala. Believe it or not, but the Ugandan giant isn't actually from Uganda. He was from the state of Mississippi. After working in companies such as Mid-South and the Continental Wrestling Association, Kamala made a splash in WWE in 1984, where he began by dominating a series of lower-level opponents before moving on to challenge Hulk Hogan for the world title. While Kamala came up short, he moved on to another top program with Andre the Giant before leaving the company. He returned a couple of years later for a second run to once again face Hogan in a series of major matches. But it was another short time with WWE as Kamala left due to a pay dispute. But in 1992, he returned once again and went after the top title by challenging Randy Savage, and yet once again came up short. But during this time, Kamala did make history by competing in and losing the first televised casket match against The Undertaker. Though his relatively brief time in WWE, the Mississippi native left enough memories in the minds of fans to land a spot on this list. Number 25, Missouri, Freddie Blassie. One of the greatest villains in wrestling history and one of the toughest humans to ever walk the planet, Freddie Blassie called Missouri home. Blassie was widely feared from Los Angeles to Japan in the 60s, becoming a major attraction and even going so far as to file his teeth to scare fans. Blassie wrestled in WWE in 1964 against Bruno Sammartino and Bobo Brazil at Madison Square Garden. Blassie later returned to the company in 1971 and nearly won the WWE United States Heavyweight Championship before losing to Pedro Morales in the finals of a tournament. Even as Blassie's in-ring career ran its course, he remained a prominent figure in the company as a manager. In 1983, he led his client, the Iron Sheik, to victory over Bob Backlund, helping him win the world title. Even though he retired a few years later, Blassie was so beloved by the McMahon family and so respected that he remained on the company's payroll until his death in 2003. Number 26, Montana, Smasher Stallone. Montana doesn't have an overwhelming number of wrestlers who have competed in WWE, but that doesn't mean the state hasn't contributed to the company's history. You just have to go back a little further. Smasher Stallone joined WWE in 1964, where he battled a series of jobbers, and later on, Bruno Sammartino in some major title matches. Along with Baron Mikhail Shkaluna, the duo captured the WWE United States Tag Team titles over Tony Parisi and Johnny Valentine in a 2 out of 3 falls match. The duo held the gold for 77 days before losing the titles, and Stallone left the company a couple of years later. While not often discussed in wrestling history, Smasher Stallone made his mark with a championship run and some marquee matches to capture the title of the Treasure State's greatest WWE wrestler. Number 27, Nebraska, Ted DiBiase. Despite being a pretty small state in terms of population, Nebraska is home to a handful of big-name wrestlers, including Gorgeous George and even the icon Sting. While Sting is arguably the bigger wrestling star, this video is on the best WWE wrestlers from every state, so we're going with the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. DiBiase quickly became part of WWE history after being awarded the WWE North American Heavyweight Championship in 1979, one of only 3 men to ever hold the belt. But it wasn't until his return in 1987 that he made his greatest mark on the company. Returning as the $1 Million Man, DiBiase became one of the most hated wrestlers of all time. He showed disdain for virtually everyone in the crowd and paid them to perform cruel tasks to his trademark laughter. Soon thereafter, DiBiase set his sights on the world title and battled Hulk Hogan in a series of marquee matches. Unable to win the gold on his own, he paid off Andre the Giant and Earl Hebner to win it for him. While the title reign wasn't officially recognized, DiBiase remained a major player in the company, even developing his own title, the $1 Million Championship. Unfortunately, DiBiase was sent into early retirement in 1993 after suffering a neck injury. However, Ted DiBiase had already cemented his legacy, and in 2010, he joined the WWE Hall of Fame. Number 28, Nevada, Ryback. Born and raised in Sin City, Ryback knew he wanted to be a professional wrestler at a young age. He got that opportunity in 2004 to compete in WWE's Tough Enough contest, but came up short of winning. Despite this, the big guy was signed by WWE, only to be let go and then re-signed. Fans first got to know Ryback when he appeared in the first season of NXT as Skip Sheffield. While he didn't win that contest either, Ryback was at the right place at the right time by taking part in the Nexus storyline. Unfortunately, the Human Wrecking Ball was injured and had to wait over a year to return. When he came back, he was given the name Ryback. This character was molded after stars like Goldberg and Ultimate Warrior, as Ryback went on a dominant winning streak, which nearly led to him capturing the World Championship. However, the company didn't quite go all in on Ryback, and his star began to fade over the following years. While he did win the Intercontinental title, Ryback was dissatisfied with his spot in the company and left in 2016. It's doubtful he'll ever return, but for a brief point in time, the Nevada wrestler received a major push and rabid fan reactions that few wrestlers get to experience. Number 29, New Hampshire, Triple H. One of the most impactful people in WWE history, on screen and behind the scenes, Triple H easily takes the pedigree of New Hampshire's best wrestler. In the late 90s and early 2000s, there was no better bad guy in the business than the Game. He dominated WWE and his opponents inside the ring. From his work in DX in the Attitude Era, to leading Evolution, to main eventing multiple WrestleManias and capturing 14 world titles along the way, the King of Kings would have easily made this list with those qualifications alone. But as his in-ring career slowed down, he took on more of a backstage role and started running NXT, helping give opportunities to many of the stars on the main roster today. Many fans praised Triple H's leadership of NXT, making it arguably WWE's best show for a few years. While H no longer wrestles, he's still shaping WWE as the chief content officer. As time goes on, it looks like Triple H will further establish his legacy as one of the most impactful wrestlers to ever join the company. Number 30, New Jersey, Buddy Rogers. Simply, without Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, there is no Nature Boy Ric Flair. While Flair may be more well known to modern wrestling fans, Rogers was a true pioneer and one of the most important wrestlers to ever lace up a pair of boots. In the early days of TV, Rogers became a huge star and often sold out major arenas. Rogers later joined WWE when it was known as the Worldwide Wrestling Federation and became the company's first world champion. It was said he won the title in a tournament in Rio de Janeiro, but that was all made up. Unfortunately, Rogers suffered a heart attack early in his championship run and only competed in incredibly brief matches for the rest of his time in the company. While the record books show Rogers' title reign as only lasting 22 days, he has firmly cemented his legacy as the first WWE champion. Number 31, New Mexico, Jakara Jackson. Similar to Alaska, New Mexico is a state that hasn't had a huge presence in WWE. However, that's changing. Jakara Jackson, born in Albuquerque, was signed by WWE in August 2021. She has a background in bodybuilding and made her debut in October 2002. Since then, she's only wrestled a few other matches. From what we've seen so far, she's got style and presence. It'll be interesting to see where Jackson's career goes as she continues to train and get more experience. In the meantime, New Mexicans can be happy knowing that someone in WWE is waving their flag. Number 32, New York, Chris Jericho. When you think of wrestlers from New York, it's probably names like Taz and the Dudleys that come to mind, but proud Canadian Chris Jericho was actually born in the small town of Manhasset, while his father was a hockey player for the New York Rangers. Jericho later moved north of the border, but since we are basing this list on where wrestlers were born, it would be insane to not go with Jericho. Joining WWE with much fanfare in 1989, Y2J became the first ever undisputed champion after defeating both The Rock and Steve Austin on the same night. From there, Jericho took part in major storylines with virtually every top name in the company, including a war with Shawn Michaels, which is considered one of the best feuds in WWE history. Jericho is also proven to be a master of reinventing his character and has fit the role of main event heel. He's also been part of memorable comedy skits with wrestlers like Christian and Kevin Owens. A 6-time world champion and a record-setting 9-time Intercontinental champion, Jericho is also a surefire WWE Hall of Famer and is the best wrestler from the Empire State. Number 33, North Carolina, Jeff Hardy. The Tar Heel State has a lot of contenders for best WWE wrestler, and it was hard to pick one. Ultimately, I went with the charismatic enigma, Jeff Hardy. Hardy wrestled his first match for the company at the age of 16, and before that was wrestling in his backyard with his brother, Matt. Both Jeff and his bro were eventually able to get full-time contracts and quickly started leaving a mark. They helped take ladder matches to the next level and were part of the first ever tables, ladders, and chairs match. After standing out thanks to his high-risk stunts, Jeff Hardy was able to start building his solo career, especially during his run from 2006 to 2009. He had several phenomenal feuds with the likes of Edge, his own brother Matt, and CM Punk. Hardy winning the WWE Championship in 2008 is arguably his greatest accomplishment and was a real feel-good moment for fans. Jeff's third WWE run from 2017 to 2021 wasn't as good, but still, the moment of seeing him and Matt return at WrestleMania 33 was something every fan was excited for. AJ Styles is another close contender for North Carolina since he was born in the city of Jacksonville, but since Styles spent the majority of his career in TNA, that's why I went with Hardy. Also, it's worth mentioning that Vince McMahon was also born in the Old North State. Number 34, North Dakota, Jack Swagger. One of the coldest cities in the United States, Fargo, didn't just produce a classic film with its name in the title, but it also delivered a real American into the world. Jack Swagger debuted in 2008 on ECW and soon captured the brand's World Championship. Just over a year after that accomplishment, he cashed in his Money in the Bank contract to become the World Heavyweight Champion. While the title run was only a few months long, it was a major moment in the young wrestler's career. Unfortunately, WWE moved Swagger out of the main event scene after that, but he did take part in a few prominent storylines over the years, most notably as part of the Real Americans with Zeb Coulter and later Cesaro as his tag team partner. The angle proved popular enough to earn Swagger a World Heavyweight Championship match at WrestleMania 29, but the All-American American came up a bit short. Even though he left WWE in 2017, Swagger is still relevant as part of AEW, and the Real American remains North Dakota's best wrestler. Number 35, Ohio, Randy Savage. Few wrestlers in WWE history are as iconic as Randy Savage. From his memorable promos to distinct voice to in-ring ability, he's one of the greatest superstars the business has ever seen. From 1985 to 1994, Savage was a consistent presence on WWE TV. Alongside Miss Elizabeth, he quickly became one of the most exciting stars in the business, putting on a classic with Ricky Steamboat at WrestleMania 3 and capturing the WWE title at WrestleMania 4. Of course, Savage had a legendary alliance and feud with Hulk Hogan, as the two friends and rivals delivered one of the 80s most popular storylines when the mega powers collided. Even as his career slowed down, Savage was a fixture in WWE as a commentator during the early days of Monday Night Raw. To date, Macho Man remains one of the most influential wrestlers to ever compete in WWE. He's been one of their biggest crossover stars they've ever produced, and memories of the Ohio-born superstar are sure to live on for generations to come. Number 36, Oklahoma, Goldberg. While Bill Goldberg became one of the most popular wrestlers in WCW, his WWE career ended up being surprisingly successful in its own right. Of course, things didn't exactly start out on a great foot. After WCW shut down, Goldberg waited a bit before joining WWE, but immediately defeated The Rock in his first match. He later went on to win the World Heavyweight Championship, but his popularity wasn't quite what it was back in WCW. Amazingly, 15 years later, Goldberg returned and defeated Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series 2016. The man came back in a big way, and the audience agreed. Goldberg would usually wrestle 2 to 3 times a year following his return, but Goldberg's star power was still so big that he even won the Universal Championship on 2 occasions. While he may not have been an in-ring general, there's no denying Goldberg's popularity and his accolades of being WWE's best wrestler from Oklahoma. Number 37, Oregon, Ken Patera. One of the strongest men in the world during his time, Ken Patera was also a force to be reckoned with inside of a WWE ring. Largely working as a heel during his first run in the company, Patera was a notable opponent for Bruno Sammartino and Bob Backlund in the main event scene. He even captured the company's Intercontinental title at one point. Ken Patera later returned to the company in the mid-80s after spending a year in prison, this time as a good guy. The run started out well, as Patera feuded with his former stablemates in the Heenan family, but after an injury, he mainly lost matches and was used as an enhancement talent. While never a top guy in the company, Patera more than held his own against some of the top stars of his time. Number 38, Pennsylvania, Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle is Pennsylvania's greatest WWE wrestler? Oh, it's true. Well, you know. Angle is of course an Olympic gold medalist, but his wrestling career may be even more impressive. For starters, very few WWE wrestlers ever adapted to the business as quickly as he did. Within 1 year of his debut, Angle won the European Championship, the Intercontinental Championship, the King of the Ring, and the WWE Championship. Angle is widely considered to be one of the greatest in-ring talents of his generation, and is one of the rare wrestlers who can cut a serious promo while also delivering widely loved comedy segments. You'd be hard-pressed to find a single bad Kurt Angle match or promo during his entire first run in the company. Even though his WWE career was cut a bit short, Angle remains one of the most decorated champions ever seen in the company, as well as one of the most entertaining wrestlers to ever compete in a WWE ring. Number 39, Rhode Island, Spike Dudley. Spike Dudley may not have held as many titles as his brothers did, but that doesn't mean he wasn't a popular wrestler in his own right. After ECW went out of business, Spike jumped to WWE to reunite with his family members Bubba Ray and Devon. During this time, Spike was known for taking crazy bumps that men twice his size wouldn't even think of performing. He wasn't just talented in the ring either. Spike was a versatile character who could be in a fun love storyline with Molly Holly or become the boss of the Dudley Boys. Spike also has some gold to his name as a former Cruiserweight champion, European champion, 8-time Hardcore champion, and a tag team champion. Not bad for being considered the runt of the Dudley family. Number 40, South Carolina, The Big Show. One of the longest tenured wrestlers in WWE history, The Big Show made an enormous statement right out of the gate by attacking Steve Austin at St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1999. The WCW star aimed to make a big splash in his new home, and did just that after winning the WWE Championship from The Rock and Triple H. Over the next 20 years, The Big Show basically did it all. He held nearly every title in the company and competed in major WrestleMania matches, with talent ranging from John Cena to Floyd Mayweather to Aki Bono. And while it's often a joke, Big Show has changed from heel to face more than perhaps anyone in WWE history. Still, that showed how versatile he was and how he could wrestle on almost any spot in the card. From the Attitude Era to the modern era, South Carolina's Big Show has been one of the most recognizable stars in the company, and one of the biggest men the wrestling business has seen yet. Number 41, South Dakota, Brock Lesnar. While he's been announced from Minneapolis, Minnesota, the next big thing is actually from Webster, South Dakota, a town of under 2,000 people. Much like Kurt Angle mentioned earlier, almost no one has taken to professional wrestling faster than Brock Lesnar. From right out of the gate, he was competing against and destroying nearly all the top names in WWE, including The Rock, to capture the Undisputed Championship at SummerSlam 2002. Brock's stature only grew bigger after leaving the company to compete in UFC, and then later return. Ever since 2012, Brock has largely been a part-time wrestler, but he still brings the big fight feel like no one else on the roster. Considering the Beast Incarnate has been one of the biggest names in wrestling since 2002, and is one of the most famous names to ever compete on a regular basis in WWE, plus a 7-time WWE champion and 3-time Universal champion, it would have been hard for anyone from South Dakota, or nearly any other state, to match his stature. Number 42, Tennessee, Randy Orton. Jerry Lawler may be the king of Memphis, Tennessee, but when it comes to overall contributions to WWE, the Viper easily wins out. In addition to his 14 world title reigns, Randy Orton is also the wrestler with the most matches in Raw history, the most pay-per-view matches in WWE history, and is also in the top 10 for most SmackDown matches. An incredible feat. Plus, with the RKO, Orton arguably has the best finisher in WWE since Steve Austin's Stunner. Amazingly, Orton has stayed a top wrestler for the company, despite newer names rising up. While his future is uncertain at the moment, the Viper really doesn't need to do anything else to cement his legacy. Simply, when it comes to WWE, there's never been a workhorse like Randy Orton. Another honorable mention for Tennessee goes to Ric Flair, who, while billed from North Carolina, was actually born in Memphis. As great as the Nature Boy was, his WWE accomplishments just don't match the Legend Killers. Number 43, Texas, Stone Cold Steve Austin. For the great state of Texas, it's incredibly difficult to pick the best WWE wrestler who was born there. For starters, Eddie Guerrero was born in the city of El Paso. The Undertaker isn't actually from Death Valley, but from Houston. But for the top WWE star, Stone Cold takes the win on this one. While the dead man had far more longevity in WWE, he was never usually the top guy. Austin, though, not only carried the company on his back during the Attitude Era, but also bring the business to new heights, smash wrestling TV viewership records, and sell countless amounts of merchandise like no one before him. In the ring, Austin is a 6-time world champion, a skilled worker, and deliverer of a number of classic matches during his time on top. Even though injuries took him out of the business years before he should have, Austin's run has yet to be topped. Number 44, Utah, Zoe Stark. Selecting the greatest WWE wrestler from Utah was, well, a little more difficult at this point in time. Few wrestlers were born in the Beehive state, which right now gives the win to NXT wrestler Zoe Stark. Still, it's not a bad choice, as Stark seems to have a bright future ahead of her. During her run in NXT, she gained experience tagging with Marina Shafir, held a single win over fan favorite Toni Storm, and even captured the NXT Women's Tag Team Championship along with Io Shirai. The team enjoyed the second longest run in the title's history before losing the gold in a 3-way ladder match. Unfortunately, Stark suffered an injury in that match and has missed months of in-ring time. Her future continues to look promising though, and is likely to pick up more momentum and proudly represent her home state of Utah well into the future. Number 45, Vermont, Vivian Vachon. For the Green Mountain State, we need to go back in time a little bit to find the greatest WWE wrestler, and that would be a member of the famous Vachon family, Vivian Vachon. Vivian's older brothers, Mad Dog and Paul Butcher Vachon, and her niece, Luna, might be more well known, but Vivian was a talented wrestler in her own right. Magazines of her era would even state Vivian as one of the best wrestlers of the 70s. She was an AWA Women's Champion and traveled to different wrestling companies throughout the United States during her career. Her WWE tenure was a bit less notable, as she only competed in a handful of matches, but her time there is what lands her on this list. Vivian is perhaps not often remembered for her contributions to women's wrestling, as she retired in her mid-30s and sadly was killed in a car crash along with her daughter at the age of 40. Number 46, Virginia, Paul Orndorff. A star right out of the gate after debuting in WWE, Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, was briefly one of the biggest names in the company. Orndorff was in the main event of the inaugural WrestleMania, teaming up with Roddy Piper in a losing effort against Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. Orndorff later saw the light and began teaming with Hulk Hogan in major matches. But just like nearly every wrestling friendship, this one didn't last forever. Mr. Wonderful turned on Hogan and delivered one of the most memorable pile drivers in WWE history. This set off an intensely personal feud, with Mr. Wonderful and Hogan facing off in huge showdowns, including one with 76,000 fans in attendance. Unfortunately, Orndorff's time as a top star was short-lived, as he suffered a terrible arm injury and was never quite the same. By 1988, he was on his way out of WWE, never to return for another match. Even with that brief run, Mr. Wonderful absolutely played an important role in WWE's history. Number 47, Washington, Daniel Bryan. One of the greatest technical wrestlers of all time, the leader of the Yes Movement and WrestleMania 30 main eventer, Daniel Bryan is also Washington's greatest professional wrestler. While a standout on the independent scene, Bryan's success in WWE is still a shock for many. As an undersized talent, he didn't seem to fit into the company's vision of what a main eventer looks like, but Bryan's connection with the crowd is nearly unrivaled, which essentially forced management to push him to the top of the card, and when given the chance, Bryan succeeded. He created memorable comedy moments in Team Hell No, took part in amazing 6-man matches with The Shield, and delivered standout matches with top names like John Cena and CM Punk. Even after his return from retirement, Bryan was still often producing some of the best work of his career. The unlikely rise of Daniel Bryan is one of the best wrestling stories in recent memory, and it'll be hard for anyone from the state of Washington to ever top him. Number 48, West Virginia, Heath Slater. West Virginia is a surprisingly close race for best WWE wrestler. Ray the Crippler Stevens had a couple of brief runs at the top of the company, but was past his prime. Jamie Noble also had his share of memorable moments in the company, but for sheer longevity and talent, the leader of the three-man band takes the top spot. Shortly into his run on the main roster, Slater took part in one of the biggest storylines in years with the Nexus, where he soon captured the tag team titles with Justin Gabriel. After the angle ran its course, Slater proved to be one of the company's most reliable roster members. For the next 10 years, he formed a band, won more tag team gold, became a social outcast, a Slater-gator, and taunted WWE legends. While he never quite reached the main event scene after the Nexus, he did have the longest run of any of the members in the group, helping him to earn his spot on this list. Number 49, Wisconsin, Mr. Kennedy. It's a little known fact, but Mr. Kennedy is from Wisconsin.
From Green Bay, Wisconsin!
Okay, so maybe he said that every time he came to the ring, but still, he's the best WWE wrestler from the Badger State. While Kennedy could hold his own in the ring, his distinct voice and work on the mic helped elevate him to another level. Vince McMahon saw so much in Kennedy that, at one point, Kennedy was slated to be revealed as Vince's storyline son in a major angle. That ultimately never played out due to a suspension, but Kennedy did enjoy rivalries with big names like The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, and Bobby Lashley. After being pushed into a prominent position, Kennedy was let go after nearly injuring Randy Orton with a back suplex. Even though he never wrestled another match in WWE, Mr. Kennedy made sure no one who was watching would forget his name.
Mr. Kennedy!
And number 50, Wyoming, Eric Bischoff. Now here's the one state where we gotta bend the rules. That's because there's never been a WWE wrestler from Wyoming. However, Eric Bischoff is a current resident of the state and has lived in Cody for years. Even though much of Bischoff's notable work occurred in WCW, he still left his mark in WWE. Bischoff made a shocking debut on Raw in 2002, hugging Vince McMahon and becoming general manager of the show. Surprisingly, he had a long run for an authority figure, running the flagship show for over 3 years, and was one of the most hated heels in the company. While on the roll, he also took part in a surprising number of matches, most notably against Steve Austin, Eugene, and John Cena. But even with Bischoff having a black belt in karate, he often came up on the losing side of his matches. Until WWE hires a wrestler from Wyoming to compete on one of their main brands, Eric Bischoff will remain the proud representative for the state. Did you know that the United States government once believed a WWE storyline was real? To find out more, watch the video on screen.